Mia, the lone black girl in a white school, faces constant isolation. Her classmates mock her ideas, ignore her talents, and label her a show-off for her passion. Rejected even by her own project partners, she clutches her dreams, silently enduring hurtful stares and whispered insults, longing for acceptance. Mia stepped off the bus, clutching her backpack tightly as she took in the large, sprawling building before her. It was her first day at Cedarwood Middle School, her first day in this new town, and already she felt a tightening in her stomach. She could feel the curious eyes of other students darting her way as they whispered to one another, sneaking glances and sometimes staring outright. She was the new kid, a familiar experience after a couple of moves already, but this time felt different. In the sea of students around her, she realized with a jolt that she was the only black student among a crowd of unfamiliar white faces. As she made her way through the hallway, her shoes echoed against the polished floors. She kept her gaze straight ahead, trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow her, though snippets of conversation reached her ears. Some students pointed subtly as she passed by, their curious glances turning into speculative murmurs that grew louder. In homeroom, Mia took a seat in the back corner of the classroom, hoping to blend in. But soon after, a girl with blonde hair and a ponytail turned around to face her, her expression one of thinly veiled curiosity mixed with something Mia couldn't quite place. The girl's friends leaned in, their eyes scanning Mia from head to toe. "Hey," the girl said, her voice a little too loud in the otherwise quiet classroom. "Are you new here?" Mia nodded, managing a small smile. "Yeah. I just moved here from Atlanta." "Oh, cool," the girl replied, but her tone wasn't exactly warm. "What's your name?" "Mia." The girl's friends exchanged looks, and one of them let out a short, whispered laugh. "Mia, huh? That's different." Mia's cheeks flushed, but she kept her focus on the desk. She could feel her hands gripping the edges of her notebook tightly, trying to stop herself from reacting. She reminded herself that this was her first day, and people didn't know her yet. "Do you, know anyone here?" one of the other girls asked, sounding genuinely curious this time. Mia shook her head. "No, not yet. I'm just trying to get settled in." They nodded, looking at each other again as if they'd confirmed something between them. Just then, the bell rang and their teacher, Mrs. Douglas, began her roll call, sparing Mia from more questions. Mia felt a slight sense of relief, but the unease lingered. As the day wore on, Mia tried to focus on her classes, her notebooks filling with notes and diagrams as she absorbed the lessons. She loved school, and science especially. Back in Atlanta, her teachers had always praised her sharp mind and quick understanding of complex topics. But here, in Cedarwood, she couldn't shake the feeling that her classmates saw her differently. It was like she was on display, a new curiosity they weren't quite sure what to do with. At lunchtime, Mia looked around the crowded cafeteria, clutching her lunch tray. She scanned the room for an empty seat, trying not to notice how other students glanced her way and then quickly looked away, as if afraid she might ask to sit with them. Her heart sank as she spotted an empty table near the back and took her seat, setting her tray down and taking a deep breath. She had barely started her sandwich when she overheard a conversation at the table next to hers. "Hey, did you see the new girl?" one of the boys asked, his voice low but audible. "Yeah, she's sitting right over there," another boy replied with a quick glance in Mia's direction. "She looks different." The boys shared a look, their smirks sending a cold wave of embarrassment washing over her. Mia hunched her shoulders, keeping her gaze fixed on her lunch. She took small bites, trying to ignore the remarks around her, willing herself to be invisible. In her last class of the day, science, Mia felt a spark of excitement return. This was her favorite subject, and she hoped it would be a place where she could feel more at home. As she settled into her seat, the teacher, Mr. Finley, started an activity on basic chemistry, pairing up students for a small group experiment. Mia ended up with two other students, a boy named Ethan and a girl named Claire. She introduced herself, smiling nervously, but Ethan barely acknowledged her, and Claire gave her a tight-lipped smile before turning her attention to the materials on the table. Mia suggested an idea to test their experiment in a slightly different way, hoping to show she knew what she was talking about. But before she could finish, Ethan interrupted. Are you sure about that? I mean, I don't think you know how this works." Mia's stomach tightened again, but she nodded, backing off. "Sure. We can do it your way." They proceeded with the experiment, and, as she'd suspected, they ended up needing to restart because of a misstep in the instructions. Mia bit her lip, resisting the urge to say anything. Claire gave her a pointed look, almost as if blaming her for the mistake. Mia felt small, trying to blend into the background, all the excitement she had for the class ebbing away. As the final bell of the day rang, Mia gathered her things, exhausted from the weight of the day's interactions. She knew it would take time to adjust, but her heart ached with the feeling of being misunderstood, of not fitting into this new world that seemed both curious and wary of her presence. When she got home that evening, her mom asked her how her day had been. Mia mustered a small smile, not wanting to worry her mother. It was okay, she replied, though inside, her heart felt heavy with doubt. She wondered if she'd ever feel comfortable here, or if this would be just another place where she'd have to prove herself over and over again. Mia glanced at her science notebook, her love for the subject sparking momentarily. She promised herself that no matter what, she would keep going. The next few days passed in much the same way for Mia, with lingering stares and whispered remarks filling her every step. Despite this, she focused on her schoolwork, determined to excel, especially in her favorite subject, science. She held on to the thought that if she proved herself, her classmates might look beyond her skin color and see her for who she truly was, a smart, curious, and passionate girl with big dreams. However, the challenges only grew as time went on. In science class, Mr. Finley announced an upcoming group project on ecosystems, and the entire class buzzed with excitement. The project was significant. It would count for a large portion of their final grade and would be displayed at the school's science fair. Mia's excitement rose at the chance to finally showcase her knowledge. She had spent countless hours reading about different ecosystems, their biodiversity, and the intricate balance of life within each one. Her mind immediately began racing with ideas, imagining a project that would not only impress her teacher but hopefully shift her classmates' perception of her. But as Mr. Finley assigned the groups, Mia's heart sank. She was paired with Ethan and Claire again. Ethan rolled his eyes as soon as he heard her name, and Claire barely suppressed a sigh. "Well, guess we're stuck together again," Ethan muttered under his breath as they pulled their desks into a cluster. "Look," Mia began, trying to inject some enthusiasm into her voice, "I have a few ideas that might work well for this project. Maybe we could focus on a rainforest ecosystem and—" Ethan interrupted, crossing his arms. "Let's not make it too complicated, okay? We don't need to go overboard." "But I think a rainforest would be interesting," Mia continued, her voice softening. "We could talk about the different layers of the forest, the species that live there, and how everything is connected. It would make our project stand out." Claire frowned. "We don't need to stand out, Mia. We just need a basic project that meets the requirements." Mia felt a pang of disappointment. She tried to explain her ideas again, gently, hoping they'd understand the excitement she felt for the topic. But they brushed her off, dismissing her enthusiasm as if it were unnecessary. "Let's just keep it simple," Ethan insisted. "We don't have to make this harder than it needs to be. And besides, are you even sure you know enough about rainforests? I mean, we don't want to mess this up." The subtle doubt in his words stung. Mia felt herself retreating inward, her mind racing with rebuttals she didn't dare voice. She knew she could handle the topic. She'd been studying ecosystems for months on her own. She'd even presented a project on the rainforest in her last school and received praise from her teacher. But here, her voice seemed to hold no weight. As they began working, Ethan and Claire kept pushing her to do menial tasks, assigning her to glue materials and arrange items rather than contributing any ideas. They ignored her suggestions, and any time she tried to speak up, they talked over her. At times, it felt as if she weren't even part of the group, just someone they had to tolerate. After a few frustrating sessions, Mia decided to work on her rainforest idea independently. She stayed up late, sketching diagrams and researching species, her passion driving her to create something memorable. Even if her classmates didn't believe in her, she was determined to pour her energy into the project. She knew the topic better than anyone else in the group, and she wasn't going to let her voice be silenced. One day, during their group meeting, Mia quietly brought a colorful, detailed diagram she'd drawn of a rainforest ecosystem. She hoped that, seeing her commitment, Ethan and Claire might be swayed to include her ideas. When she unrolled the poster, her group members stared at it, visibly surprised by the intricate artwork and details. "Did you do all this?" Claire asked, sounding a bit impressed despite herself. Mia nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. "Yes. I thought it could make our project stand out. Each layer of the rainforest is represented here, and I've labeled the different species that live in each part. We could use this as a visual to explain our ecosystem." For a moment, Ethan and Claire seemed interested. But then Ethan shrugged dismissively. "It's good, I guess, but we don't really need it. We're just doing a basic forest ecosystem, remember? No need for all this extra stuff." Mia's heart sank as he rolled up the poster, setting it aside without a second glance. But this could really help us stand out," Mia tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look, Mia," Claire said, sounding exasperated, We get that you want to do all this fancy stuff, but it's just not necessary. Just stick to the basics. We don't want to risk messing it up with too much detail. Mia bit her lip, forcing herself to hold back the words bubbling up inside her. She wanted to tell them that their project could be something amazing, something meaningful. But she could tell it was no use. To them, she was just the new girl, someone they barely trusted to understand the basics, let alone contribute anything meaningful. When it came time to present their project in front of the class, Mia watched as Ethan and Claire took the lead, summarizing their ecosystem with minimal detail. Mia's heart ached as she saw her rainforest diagram lying in her backpack, untouched. She knew she could have elevated the project, but her ideas had been left behind, dismissed as unimportant. Mr. Finley nodded politely as the group presented, but Mia noticed his eyes drift toward her a few times, as if sensing something was missing. When they finished, he asked a few questions, and Mia instinctively raised her hand, ready to explain some of the concepts in depth. But Ethan spoke over her, giving short, vague answers that barely scratched the surface. The presentation ended with polite applause from the class, and Mia forced herself to smile, though she felt a heaviness in her chest. She'd hoped that this project would be her chance to show everyone what she was capable of, but she'd barely had a voice in her own work. As they returned to their seats, Mr. Finley approached Mia, giving her a kind smile. "Great job on the presentation, Mia," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I could tell you put a lot of thought into this topic. You seem to have a real passion for ecosystems." Mia's heart lifted slightly at his words, though she couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for what the project could have been. "Thank you," she murmured, managing a small smile. "But I just wish I could have done more." Mr. Finley gave her an understanding nod. "Keep that enthusiasm, Mia. You're going to do great things." As he walked away, Mia felt a renewed sense of determination. Even though her classmates hadn't seen her potential, she held on to the encouragement from Mr. Finley. She promised herself that the next time an opportunity arose, she wouldn't let anyone hold her back. But deep down, she also realized that Cedarwood Middle School was a place where she would face countless challenges, not just because of her background but because of the prejudices and assumptions that surrounded her every day. The following week, Mr. Finley announced an upcoming science fair, and the entire class buzzed with excitement. It would be held in 3 weeks, and all students were expected to participate in groups. Winning the science fair would mean recognition from the school's administration, a special certificate, and a small scholarship to encourage their academic interests. Mia's heart raced at the thought of showcasing her ideas on a bigger stage. She was passionate about science, and a science fair project could be the perfect opportunity to show everyone her abilities and dedication. As Mr. Finley explained the project's requirements, Mia's mind was already swirling with ideas. She could barely contain her enthusiasm, imagining complex topics like the impact of climate change on specific ecosystems or the delicate relationships between species within the rainforest. She wanted her project to stand out, something that would not only impress the judges but also reveal her true passion for science. However, her excitement faded quickly as Mr. Finley began assigning the groups. Mia was placed with Ethan and Claire once more. She glanced at them nervously, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would be more open-minded this time. The science fair was a significant event, after all, and they might want to aim for something outstanding. But as she approached them with her initial ideas, Ethan and Claire exchanged glances, already looking bored. "So, I was thinking," Mia began, her voice full of optimism, "we could do something on the effects of climate change on a specific ecosystem, like the rainforest. We could show how different species are interconnected and—" Ethan cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Why do you always want to do such complicated stuff, Mia? We don't need to make this project a big deal. Let's just do something simple like, I don't know, a water cycle demonstration or something." Claire nodded in agreement. "Yeah, the judges probably won't care that much. We don't need to go all out." Mia felt her excitement deflate. She tried to hide her disappointment, but it showed in her face. "But don't you want to make a good impression? I mean, this is a science fair. It's our chance to show what we know." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Honestly, Mia, we just want to get it done and get a good grade. We don't have to go overboard." Besides, I'm not sure you really know how to explain all that complicated stuff anyway. The subtle jab stung. Mia clenched her hands under the table, fighting to keep her composure. She wanted to argue, to stand up for her ideas, but she remembered how they had dismissed her before. A part of her feared that if she pushed too hard, they might retaliate by shutting her out completely. Reluctantly, she nodded, swallowing her pride. Okay, she said quietly. We can keep it simple. As the days went by, Mia did her best to contribute ideas, hoping to elevate their project without making it too complicated. She suggested small additions, a few facts about the importance of clean water in ecosystems, or how climate change could affect water sources. But each time she tried, Ethan and Claire brushed her off, only including the bare minimum in their project outline. One afternoon, after yet another group meeting where her suggestions had been dismissed, Mia decided to create a small model at home on her own. She spent hours building a diorama of a rainforest with labeled plants, animals, and water systems, pouring all her enthusiasm and knowledge into it. She thought that maybe if she showed her group members how much potential their project had, they would be more open to her ideas. The next day, Mia brought her model to school, carefully setting it on the table as she waited for Ethan and Claire to arrive. When they saw it, their expressions shifted from mild curiosity to irritation. "What's this?" Claire asked, frowning as she looked at the model. "I made it last night," Mia explained, her voice filled with hope. "I thought it could be part of our project. We could use it to show the layers of the rainforest and how each part depends on the others. It's not too complicated, and it would definitely catch the judge's attention." Ethan sighed, crossing his arms. "We didn't ask you to do all this, Mia. We already have our project planned out. We don't need whatever this is." Mia's heart sank. She'd stayed up late working on the model, hoping to show her dedication and inspire her teammates. But they seemed more annoyed than impressed. She opened her mouth to argue, but Claire shook her head. "Honestly, Mia, you're just making it harder on yourself. Just do what we agreed on, okay? We don't need any extras." Mia lowered her gaze, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. No matter how hard she tried, it seemed her efforts weren't welcome here. She'd hoped that the science fair project could be her chance to shine, to prove herself, but it was clear that Ethan and Claire weren't interested in working with her. They only saw her as an inconvenience, someone who was making their simple project more complicated. That night, Mia sat at her desk, looking at the rainforest model she'd made. She felt a tear slip down her cheek as she realized how isolated she felt in this new school. She was doing her best to make friends, to show her passion, but every attempt seemed to fall flat. Her classmates didn't see her potential, they only saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't quite fit in. After a long moment of contemplation, she made a decision. If her group members didn't want her help, she would work on her own. She'd create a project that showcased everything she knew about ecosystems, a project that she could be proud of. She didn't care about the grade or the prize anymore. She just wanted to prove to herself that she could do it. Mia spent the next few days working tirelessly on her individual project in secret, sketching diagrams, gathering materials, and crafting detailed explanations for each part of her model. She poured all her love for science into the project, determined to make something incredible even if no one else would see it. But as the science fair approached, a new fear began to settle in her mind. She knew that presenting a separate project could lead to problems with her group members and maybe even with her teacher. Yet she felt like she had no choice. She couldn't keep letting her voice be ignored and her ideas dismissed. She told herself that, no matter the outcome, she would stand by her work. And even if she had to face the consequences alone, she would hold on to the belief that her passion and knowledge were worth something. The week of the science fair arrived, and tension simmered just below the surface in Mia's group. Mia continued working on her own project at home, while during school hours, she went along with the simplified project her group had agreed upon. Every time she looked at their project, a basic water cycle display, she felt a pang of disappointment. She knew it could be so much more if her classmates would only let her share her ideas. The night before the science fair, Mia put the final touches on her rainforest model. She had created a beautifully detailed miniature ecosystem, complete with labeled plant and animal species, pathways for water flow, and a small interactive section where viewers could see how cutting down a tree or polluting water affected the whole system. It was everything she had envisioned for her group project, and even though she knew she couldn't present it officially, she was proud of her work. Mia's plan was to keep the model in her backpack and bring it out after the fair, maybe to show Mr. Finley or use it as a personal display. She knew it wouldn't win any awards or gain her any recognition, but at least she could share it with someone who cared. Mr. Finley, after all, had shown interest in her ideas before. Maybe he would appreciate her effort, even if no one else did. On the day of the science fair, the classroom was a hive of activity as students set up their displays and final touches were added to each project. Mia glanced around, taking in the variety of experiments and displays. Some were simple, like her group's water cycle model, while others were more elaborate, showing the dedication of students who had been able to fully explore their ideas with supportive teams. The sight only deepened her sense of isolation, but she kept her expression neutral as she helped Ethan and Claire arrange their materials. When Mr. Finley came by to check their setup, Mia noticed him frown slightly at the simplicity of their project. He looked over at her, a question in his eyes, but Mia lowered her gaze, not wanting to explain everything. She had no desire to start any conflict, especially in front of her classmates. As the fair began, judges and students moved around the room, inspecting each project. Mia stayed quietly by her group's presentation, letting Ethan and Claire do most of the talking. She answered a few questions from the judges when prompted, but her heart wasn't in it. She kept glancing at her backpack, where her rainforest model waited unseen. The knowledge that she couldn't share her work in the way she dreamed filled her with frustration and sadness. Just as she was about to resign herself to a quiet afternoon, one of the judges noticed her bag and the edge of the model peeking out. "What's that in your bag, dear?" the judge asked, her voice kind and curious. "It looks like you have another project in there." Mia froze, her cheeks reddening. She looked over at Ethan and Claire, who were staring at her with a mix of shock and irritation. "Oh, it's just something I was working on at home," Mia stammered, unsure how to explain. She hadn't planned on showing it, but now that someone had noticed, she felt trapped. She looked at the judge's expectant smile and, reluctantly, pulled the model out of her bag. Gasps of admiration filled the room as students and judges gathered around to see. The miniature rainforest ecosystem was far more detailed and complex than most of the other projects on display, with vibrant colors, intricate details, and small movable pieces. The judges asked Mia to explain it, and despite her nervousness, she began speaking, her voice growing more confident as she described the ecosystem and how each element affected the others. "This is amazing, Mia," one of the judges said, impressed. "You've clearly put a lot of thought and effort into this. Why didn't you submit this as your main project?" Before Mia could answer, Ethan cut in, his voice defensive. "This isn't our project. She did it all by herself without telling us. We agreed to do the water cycle, but she decided to work on something different." Claire nodded, crossing her arms. "Yeah, she just went off and made this whole thing without even asking us." Mia looked down, the thrill of admiration quickly replaced by embarrassment. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, a mix of envy and judgment. She hadn't meant to create any drama, she just wanted to show her ideas. But now she could see that Ethan and Claire felt betrayed, as if she tried to steal the spotlight. The judges glanced at each other, clearly taken aback by the tension in the group. "Well, group projects can sometimes be challenging," one judge said diplomatically. "But Mia's knowledge and hard work here are commendable. I hope you'll all appreciate the dedication each of you has shown." Mia gave a small nod, grateful for the judge's kindness, but the weight of the situation lingered. She had unintentionally embarrassed her group and drawn unwanted attention to herself. After the judges moved on, Ethan turned to Mia, his face flushed with anger. "Why did you have to show off like that?" he hissed. "You just had to make it about you, didn't you?" Mia's heart sank. "I wasn't trying to show off. I thought maybe we could do something different, something better." Claire shook her head, her expression cold. "We didn't need better, Mia. We needed a team player. You can't just do things on your own and expect us to be okay with it." Mia wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd only been trying to help, but the words caught in her throat. She could see the resentment in their faces, and for the first time, she realized that no matter what she did, her efforts might never be enough to earn their respect. They didn't want her ideas, they just wanted her to follow along. As the day went on, Mia stayed by her group's display, but she felt like an outsider. Other students whispered about her project, and while some praised her talent, others looked at her with disdain. She'd hoped to make friends through her passion for science, to show her classmates that she had something to offer. But instead, it seemed she'd only managed to alienate them further. That afternoon, when she returned home, Mia's mother immediately sensed something was wrong. She sat Mia down at the kitchen table, gently encouraging her to share what had happened. At first, Mia tried to brush it off, but the weight of the day's events was too much to keep inside. "I just wanted to show them I could do something good," Mia said, her voice trembling. "But they didn't want my help. They didn't want anything from me." Her mother's eyes filled with empathy as she listened. "Mia, sometimes people don't recognize the value of others, especially if they're different. But that doesn't mean you should stop sharing your gifts. You're incredibly talented, and one day, people will see that." Mia nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. She wanted to believe her mother's words, but the reality of her situation was difficult to ignore. She tried her best, but it had only led to more resentment and loneliness. She couldn't help but wonder if things would ever get better. That night, as she lay in bed, Mia reflected on everything that had happened. She was proud of her project, of the knowledge she'd shared and the effort she'd put in. But she also felt more isolated than ever, trapped in a school where her classmates viewed her as an outsider, a know-it-all who didn't belong. Mia resolved to keep going, to hold on to her love for science and her dreams of making a difference. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her journey would only get harder from here. The day of the science fair arrived, and Cedarwood Middle School's gym was transformed into a lively exhibition space, with rows of tables displaying colorful projects. Posters, models, and experiments filled the room, and students buzzed with excitement, eagerly discussing their work as judges circulated through the exhibits. Mia's stomach was in knots as she helped Ethan and Claire set up their group's water cycle display, feeling both dread and resignation. Their project was positioned near the center of the room, alongside other displays from her classmates. Mia tried to muster enthusiasm as she taped down the final pieces, but the disappointment lingered. She kept her rainforest model safely tucked away in her bag, unsure if she'd even get the chance to show it to anyone. Ethan and Claire had barely spoken to her since the previous day's incident. Ethan's face remained stony as they arranged the materials, while Claire shot Mia a sidelong glance, her expression still filled with irritation. Mia could feel the tension hanging over them, and it made the whole experience uncomfortable. She tried to focus on the positive, telling herself that maybe someone would appreciate her work eventually, even if it wasn't her group. As the science fair officially began, a panel of judges entered the gym, weaving between the tables and pausing to ask questions. Mia watched as they examined each project with interest, complimenting some displays and engaging students in discussions about their work. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as they approached their group's table. Ethan took the lead, eagerly explaining their water cycle model in a rehearsed tone, his voice smooth and confident. Claire chimed in occasionally, nodding along and adding brief explanations. Mia stood to the side, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, unsure if she should speak or stay quiet. She wanted to contribute, but she feared her input would be met with more hostility from her group. One of the judges, a woman with kind eyes and a notebook in hand, glanced over at Mia, as if noticing her presence for the first time. "And what do you think, Mia?" the judge asked, her smile encouraging. "Do you have anything to add about the project?" Mia hesitated, glancing at Ethan and Claire, whose expressions were carefully neutral. She took a deep breath, feeling a surge of courage. "Well, the water cycle is important, but I think it's also connected to the broader ecosystem. For example, in the rainforest, the water cycle impacts plants and animals at every level, creating a delicate balance." The judge's eyes lit up with interest. "That's an excellent point, Mia. Would you happen to have any additional visuals for that?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and Claire's gaze narrowed, but Mia ignored them. She reached into her bag and carefully pulled out her rainforest model, setting it on the table. Gasps of admiration filled the area as the judge and nearby students leaned in to get a closer look. "This is a model I made to show how water flows through different levels of the rainforest," Mia explained, her confidence growing as she spoke. "Each layer of the forest depends on the water cycle to sustain life, and I wanted to highlight how even small changes can impact the entire ecosystem." The judge examined the model closely, nodding approvingly. "This is incredible, Mia. You've put a lot of thought into this. It's clear you have a deep understanding of the topic." Mia felt a surge of pride, but the feeling was short-lived. She could feel the glares from Ethan and Claire, their irritation palpable. They exchanged a look, and Mia knew that in their eyes, she had crossed a line. She was stealing attention from their project, making them look unprepared. As the judges moved on, Ethan turned to Mia, his voice low and angry. "I thought we agreed to keep it simple. Why did you have to bring out your little project? Are you just trying to show off?" Mia's heart sank. "I wasn't trying to show off. I just wanted to share what I'd worked on. I thought it would help make our project better." Claire crossed her arms, her expression cold. "You always think you know better than everyone else. Maybe you should have just done the project on your own instead of dragging us down with your extra ideas." The words stung, and Mia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd only been trying to contribute, but she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Her classmates saw her as an outsider, a threat to their status, and nothing she said would change that. As the science fair continued, Mia stayed by the table, feeling more isolated than ever. Students walked by and whispered, some sneaking glances at her model and others simply ignoring her. Even the praise from the judge felt hollow now. She tried her best, but her efforts had only made things worse. Later in the day, after the judges had finished their rounds and the excitement of the fair began to wind down, Mr. Finley approached Mia. He'd heard about the rainforest model from one of the judges and wanted to see it for himself. "This is incredible, Mia," he said, inspecting the model with admiration. "I can tell you put a lot of thought and effort into this." Mia managed a small smile, grateful for his support but still feeling the sting of her classmates' rejection. "Thank you, Mr. Finley. I thought it could make our project better, but Ethan and Claire didn't want to use it." Mr. Finley nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes people have a hard time accepting ideas that are different from their own. But that doesn't mean your ideas aren't valuable. You should be proud of what you've accomplished here." Mia's heart lifted slightly at his words, though the feeling was bittersweet. She was proud of her work, but the experience had left her feeling even more alone. She thanked Mr. Finley quietly, grateful for his kindness, but as he walked away, the weight of the day's events settled back onto her shoulders. As the science fair drew to a close, the principal took to the microphone to announce the winners. Mia stood by her group's display, feeling a flicker of hope despite everything. She knew the project was simple, but she still wondered if maybe, just maybe, her contributions would be recognized. In third place, we have Ethan, Claire, and Mia's project on the water cycle, the principal announced, and a polite round of applause followed. Ethan and Claire immediately brightened, their earlier anger fading as they accepted their certificates with beaming smiles. Mia accepted hers quietly, feeling conflicted. She was glad for the recognition, but she couldn't ignore the emptiness she felt, knowing that her hard work on the rainforest model would go unrecognized. As the winners gathered on stage for a photo, Mia stood beside Ethan and Claire, who were laughing and chatting with each other, acting as if she weren't even there. In that moment, Mia felt invisible, a stranger in her own team. She had tried so hard to prove herself, but it had only made her feel more isolated than ever. On the bus ride home, Mia held her certificate tightly, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. She had achieved a small victory, but it felt empty, overshadowed by the tension with her classmates and the cold reception her model had received. The science fair had been her chance to prove herself, but now she wasn't sure if it had been worth the struggle. Her mother greeted her warmly when she got home, eager to hear about the science fair. Mia forced a smile as she recounted the day, leaving out the painful details. She showed her mother the certificate, but her excitement felt forced, the pride overshadowed by the lingering bitterness. As she lay in bed that night, Mia stared at her rainforest model on her desk, feeling the familiar ache of loneliness settle over her. She realized that no matter how hard she tried, she would always face challenges in Cedarwood. Her classmates saw her as different, and their biases were like walls she couldn't break down. Mia promised herself that she wouldn't give up, that she would keep working hard, but the journey felt lonelier than ever. The science fair was only the beginning, and deep down, Mia knew there were more challenges ahead, more battles she'd have to fight on her own. As she drifted off to sleep, a part of her wondered if things would ever truly change, or if she would always be an outsider, a girl whose talents were seen as a threat rather than a gift. As Mia returned home that evening, clutching the small certificate that symbolized her bittersweet achievement, she felt the weight of both victory and isolation pressing heavily on her shoulders. The science fair had been her chance to shine, to finally prove herself, but it had come at a cost she hadn't anticipated. She had seen a glimpse of her potential and had felt the thrill of recognition, but the rejection and loneliness she faced left a wound that no award could heal. But Mia wasn't ready to give up. Despite the harsh realities and setbacks, a spark remained within her, a quiet but determined resolve to keep pushing forward. She knew that her journey had only just begun and that the road ahead would be filled with even greater challenges and unexpected triumphs. Somewhere, there had to be a place where her passion would be appreciated, a community that would embrace her for the bright and talented person she truly was. Mia's story is far from over. As she faces new trials, meets new allies and adversaries, and navigates the complicated world around her, she will be tested in ways she never imagined. And through it all, her strength and resilience will guide her toward a brighter future. To all of you following Mia's journey, get ready for more twists and turns, moments of hope and heartbreak, and the inspiring evolution of a young girl who refuses to let the world define her. Stay tuned, as the most thrilling and heartwarming parts of Mia's story are yet to come. Let's go along with Mia, step by step, and see where her unbreakable spirit will lead her next.